Fernando Alonso is undoubtedly one of the most talented drivers on the F1 grid right now. Even stacking his abilities with greats from previous generations, I have no doubt that Alonso could hold his own against the very best. Senna, Prost, Schumacher even, you name it. Yet, the man has only two World Drivers' Championship titles to his name. Now don't get me wrong, that's still an incredible achievement, something most F1 drivers don't even get close to achieving. If you look at the numbers, there have been 775 F1 drivers over the years since the first F1 World Championship race, the 1950 British Grand Prix, and out of those, only 34 drivers have ever won a championship. The number who've won two is even slimmer, at only 16. The fact that despite having achieved two World Drivers' Championship titles, the title of this video inquires whether Alonso's been a wasted talent really does make you wonder. How good is Fernando Alonso really? And what factors have there been that have led to a man who should, on merit, be equaling the number of titles possessed by far more decorated drivers to be left with only two? First, for the newer fans of this sport, we should go through Fernando's history as a part of the F1 grid. After all, the man is the oldest driver on the grid and holds the record for the most number of race starts at 377. Alonso joined the Formula One grid in 2000 as a test driver for the Minardi F1 team. Having impressed in his role during that year, he was promoted to a race seat in 2001, where he outperformed his teammate, Tarso Marquez. This performance caught the eye of Renault, who offered Alonso a test drive for 2002, and again, having impressed in that year, he was promoted to a full-time race seat in 2003 with Renault. In 2003, he finished sixth in the drivers' standings with 55 points and even managed to secure his first Grand Prix win at the Hungarian Grand Prix that year. In 2004, he took another step up, this year finishing fourth in the Drivers' Championship before the years 2005 and 2006, where he won both of his championships, with phenomenal performances, winning 7 races and finishing on the podium 12 times in 2005, and winning 7 races and finishing on the podium 14 times in 2006. Alonso moved to McLaren in 2007, but after a season mired with controversy to say the least, he returned to Renault for 2008 and 2009 before moving to Ferrari in 2010. Fernando was fairly successful during his stint at Ferrari and won on his debut for the team, a feat only achieved by 5 drivers in the history of Ferrari. He finished as the runner-up to the championship in 2010, 12, and 13, being in contention for the championship till the very last race in both 2010 and 2012. He won 11 races during his time at Ferrari, but could not taste title glory with the Scuderia, and as he grew frustrated with Ferrari's inability to provide him with a championship-winning car, with his successes there a result of him dragging the Ferrari into positions it honestly didn't deserve to be, he left the team at the end of the 2014 season to head for McLaren. After a series of lacking career moves, Fernando got to McLaren in 2015, and that stint was clearly the last straw for him. His time at McLaren is well known by a few notable incidents, namely the GP2 engine fiasco at Honda's home race in Suzuka. Just in general, you could very clearly see the frustration growing in Fernando Alonso's mind with the situation he found himself in, which led to a poor series of incidents that led to Fernando having a bitter taste with the sport, and some fans feeling bitterly towards him too, as a result of his outbursts during his time at McLaren. It's important to note that there is almost no elite driver who hasn't had their fair share of outbursts and moments of controversy in the sport, but in most cases, they haven't lasted the duration of Alonso's frustrating stint at McLaren. Alonso retired at the end of the 2018 season, not because he didn't have it in him to race anymore, even at the age of 36, which is by no means young, but retired because he had no options to race in a competitive car, and it was evident that Alonso couldn't bring himself to race in subpar machinery any longer. That just demotivated him further and didn't allow him to challenge for what he was actually racing in F1 for, his third title. Which F1 driver, honestly, knowing how ferociously competitive they are, would be satisfied fighting for scraps of points, if even that, when they've tasted the glory of fighting for world championships and race wins, and achieved the highest titles that the sport has to offer? In his time away from Formula One, it's not like Alonso was just sitting on the sidelines and looking to pick up trackside roles as you'd see many drivers go into after retirement, but instead, He raced in a number of different series, like the World Endurance Championship, the Dakar Rally, and the Indy 500. Alonso won the 24 Hours of Le Mans twice in 2018 and 19, while also picking up the title in the World Endurance Championship. Fast forward to 2021, when Alonso was announced as one of the drivers for the Alpine F1 team. The amount of backlash this decision received was astounding for someone as talented as Alonso. Theoretically, two of the main arguments that were made for why Alonso shouldn't have the Alpine seat for 2021 had some rationale behind them, and they were, firstly, was Alonso too old for a return to the pinnacle of motorsport? And secondly, Alonso's had his time in Formula One. It's time to give the other younger drivers a shot. To address the first point, there was really no way to know for sure if Alonso was too old to return to Formula One, besides seeing how he actually performed on his return. While he'd shown absolutely no signs of losing his abilities as a competent F1 driver till the very last race in 2018, it had been an extremely long time since he was in a situation where he could fight for race wins and show what he was really capable of. It's not like his return to Alpine was in a front-running car, but it was still a valid hesitancy to have in many fans' minds whether the Alonso returning to F1 in 2021 was still the same Alonso that the new generation of Drive to Survive fans hadn't ever even seen. I wouldn't actually be surprised if this was a contributing factor in why Alonso received as much backlash as he did for returning to F1. Most new fans hadn't even seen Alonso outside of what was portrayed in Drive to Survive Season 1 and his McLaren stint, and they probably had no idea what this man was really made of. It should also be noted that at this point, Alonso was touching his 40s, and the only other driver in recent history that had been racing till that stage was Kimi Raikkonen. And while he was a brilliant driver, no doubt, it was obvious to everyone that his abilities had tailed off in his last years in the sport. No one could really be blamed for thinking that something similar could be the case with Alonso. He may just not be able to compete with the upper echelon of drivers in 2021. The second point, which was Alonso's had his time in Formula One, it's time to give the other younger drivers a shot, has the potential, honestly, to spin off into a whole different video. Like this video and drop a comment if you'd like me to make a video on this topic altogether. But this has arguably been a question that's growing in prevalence in Formula One, with an increasing number of junior drivers not getting the opportunity to drive in Formula One. A notable example of this being Felipe Drugovich, the 2022 F2 champion, who's sitting on the sidelines this year as Aston Martin's reserve driver. For the context of this video though, the only thing I can really say is that each team has to do what they believe is best for them in terms of creating a driver lineup that gives them the best potential to maximize what that car is capable of each year. And Alpine clearly believed that Alonso was one of the two drivers to enlist, given that criteria. It's safe to say that Alonso hit the ground running when he joined Alpine in 2021, putting in performances that were at the peak of what the Alpine was capable of achieving that year. The most memorable of his performances that year, in my opinion, was during the Hungarian Grand Prix, where he literally defended against Lewis Hamilton like a lion, allowing Esteban to grab his maiden Grand Prix win. That drive just showed the strength of character that Alonso still had within him. He wasn't afraid of a rough fight with anyone, and he would go to the most extreme lengths to defend a position if he really wanted to. Stats-wise, Alonso outperformed Ocon in 2021, albeit just barely, finishing 10th in the championship over Esteban, who was right behind in 11th, and they were almost neck and neck in qualifying, with Alonso having an average grid position of 10.5 to Esteban's 10.68. 2022 yielded fairly similar results, with Alonso continuing to prove that he was still at the top of his game. The most notable performance that year was the shock front row start he achieved at the Canadian Grand Prix. The stats favored Esteban this year, with him finishing 8th in the championship to Alonso's 9th, but when you consider that Alonso had 5 DNFs to Esteban's 2, combined with the fact that his average grid position was still higher than Esteban's, I'd still say that Alonso was the better driver over the course of the season. Following the absolute mess that ensued after Alpine's catastrophic mismanagement of their drivers for the 2023 season, and Sebastian Vettel announcing his retirement out of nowhere, which is something I really don't want to get into in this video or it's going to be stupidly long, Alonso proceeded to make what seemed to be a shock move to Aston Martin at the time. The F1 circus went wild again, saying, "Oh my god, Alonso made yet another terrible career move," or "What is Alonso on?" going from a team 5th in the championship to 9th. To this day, Even knowing how a major part of the 2023 season has played out as I'm recording this after the Mexican Grand Prix, I have no idea how to evaluate whether Alonso knew something we didn't at the time of this move, or just took another gamble because it was clear he wasn't going to get the results he was looking for if he kept driving for Alpine anyway. Despite Fernando Alonso seeming to never age, I'm sure he was aware that he's pushing 43 this year, and didn't have all eternity to give Alpine the time to sort themselves out, especially considering they were no closer to actually doing that than they were when he first joined the team. In fact, if anything, they just look to be more in disarray than ever. Separate video on Alpine coming too, by the way. Like and comment if you're interested in that. Personally, putting aside the reasons for Alpine not getting him where he wanted to be, I think Alonso was attracted to Aston Martin because he could see the ambition that Lawrence Stroll had to make Aston a frontrunner, and he really had nothing to lose in making that switch. Seeing how Aston started the 2023 season firing on all cylinders, the move to Aston Martin seemed to finally have paid off for Alonso, instantly rocketing him into machinery that was capable of allowing him to channel his ungodly abilities to achieve 6 podium finishes in the opening 8 races of the 2023 season. While Alonso clearly had a strong fan base when he made the switch to Aston Martin, it's very safe to assume that he silenced a lot of his critics and unsupportive fans in the sport when he put in the kind of performances that he did during the opening 2023 races. I mean, that opening race in Bahrain and the move he made on Hamilton around the outside, just wow. His performances for Aston Martin in 2023 have clearly been nothing short of absolutely impressive, and the relentless domination over his teammate, Lance Stroll, has been yet another metric to demonstrate his godlike talent even at 43 years of age. Even putting aside his race performances for 1 second, the amount of awareness and presence of mind Alonso has during a race is right up there with the greatest of the greats. Alonso even commented on a move Stroll made during the Miami Grand Prix because he was watching the big TV screen that's put up for the fans in the grandstand while he was going into turn 1. I mean, that's insane. We've even had Max do things like that this year, but if I'm drawing parallels to Max Verstappen, who is literally performing at a level that makes him seem like he's from another planet right now, that really says something about Alonso too. I'm not gonna lie, it's been disappointing to see Aston Martin fall off their position of having the second fastest car from the beginning of the season to now having lost fourth in the constructors to McLaren this year. As their performances have gotten poorer over this year, we've started to see instances of frustration from Alonso too, bringing back reminders of similar incidents during previous stints. Although the frustration that we've seen, at least, is nowhere near the level he publicly demonstrated during his stint at McLaren, but then again, it hasn't really been that long either with Aston Martin, so who knows how it'll evolve if Aston Martin continue to underdeliver. I think it's important to mention here that it really wasn't in Aston Martin's plans to be competing at the front this year, and they always mentioned that their ambition was to be challenging at the front from 2024, with Mike Crack himself commenting at the start of the 2023 season that this jump in performance seems to have materialized a year earlier than Aston themselves expected to see it. Combine that with the fact that Aston's been in the process of shifting facilities over the course of the 2023 season, and it's still potentially excusable why they haven't been able to keep up with the rate of development when compared to their rival teams, Mercedes and McLaren in particular, with the latter having made a remarkable resurgence midway through the 2023 season that's taken them from the bottom of the pack to consistently challenging for podiums at various track types. It is still important to call out Aston for having gone in the wrong direction with their development path, but all I'm saying is that it's kinda excusable, assuming they get their act together next year. The momentum currently definitely isn't with Aston Martin, especially just having lost fourth in the constructors to McLaren, and unless they hit the ground running in 2024 and surprise the paddock again like they did in 23, it looks to be quite difficult for them to provide Alonso with the machinery he seeks to challenge for race wins and potentially a third world title. Therefore, it remains to be seen whether Alonso's move to Aston Martin will actually provide the results he was hoping for, or whether it was just to provide another glimmer of what Alonso is still capable of achieving before having that opportunity taken from himself again. If that did indeed happen, it really does have to be asked whether Alonso's incredible talent has been wasted, or at least not been used to nearly its full potential. Because as a driver, in a sport like Formula One, there's only so much you can do when the machinery you're provided with limits you as much as Fernando's has over the course of his career. This also makes me wonder if, In an alternate reality, Fernando was in the Mercedes during their era of dominance instead of at McLaren. How many more titles would he have accumulated? Let me know what you think in the comments below to this question, and also your thoughts on the entire video. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.